A few years ago, a student in my course said something I have not been able to shake since. If I can't find my purpose for living, maybe I don't have a reason to live. She was not in crisis. She was thoughtful, creative, and close with her family and friends. She had just taken a widely used questionnaire about meaning in life and scored low on the questions about purpose. The questionnaire had done exactly what it was built to do. This video is about what that cost her and about what it might be costing you. I've spent decades teaching, and decades before that as a military officer and corporate executive, working inside some of the most mission-driven institutions on Earth. I am not someone who is allergic to purpose. I've lived by it. But something has gone wrong with how our entire culture talks about it, and I think it's time someone said so plainly. The assumption: nobody examines. Rick Warren's The Purpose-Driven Life has sold more than 50 million copies. Simon Sinek's Start With Why brought the same idea into every corporate training room. The Ikigai framework, a simplified, westernized version of a more subtle Japanese concept, turned it into an infographic you've probably seen dozens of times. Find the overlap between what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. Tens of thousands of books, hundreds of millions of readers. One shared, mostly unexamined assumption underneath all of them: a meaningful life requires a clear, singular, discoverable, future-facing purpose. And if you don't have one, something essential is missing. I want to push back on that assumption, not because purpose is bad, because the assumption is wrong, and the cost of getting it wrong is higher than anyone selling these books has had to account for. Where this idea actually came from. It feels like common sense. It is not. It's a specific cultural inheritance you can trace directly. The purpose framework is, at root, a secularized version of Calvinist vocation. The idea that God assigns each person a calling and a well-lived life is the fulfillment of that assignment. The sociologist Max Weber documented how this idea quietly became the scaffolding of the entire modern Western work ethic. Rick Warren put the theology back in explicitly. The self-help industry took the theology back out and kept the structure. This matters because an idea that feels universal, but isn't, when handed to people from a wide range of backgrounds and cultures, produces exactly the kind of confusion my students kept describing. They were not failing the question. The question was failing them. What my students actually have here is what took me the longest to see, because it ran against everything I'd been trained to expect. My students were not short on meaning. They were short on one particular kind of meaning, the future-organizing, mission-shaped kind that the purpose books treat as the only kind that counts. What they had in abundance was something else: deep, present-tense engagement. Art, music, friendship, creativity. The pleasure of a good conversation, a well-made thing, a shared meal. They could talk for an hour about what made them feel alive. They went blank the moment I asked what it was all for. The purpose framework has no box for that kind of richness. It treats present tense engagement as a pleasant detour. Fine, but not the real thing. Not until it adds up to something pointed at a future destination. I think that ordering is backwards. The Frankl problem. Viktor Frankl is the most cited authority behind the purpose movement. His book, Man's Search for Meaning, is offered as proof that future-oriented purpose is what keeps people going even in the worst conditions imaginable. Here's what almost nobody mentions. Frankl developed his future orientation in a concentration camp, where the present had been deliberately stripped away. He had almost nothing left in the present worth holding on to, so he held on to the future, a lecture he hoped to give, a wife he hoped to find. Even then, he noticed that some prisoners found fragments of present-tense meaning too, in small acts like sharing a piece of bread with someone more desperate than themselves. But the future was his survival strategy for a specific kind of devastation. Your present life, with its relationships, its creative engagements, its daily satisfactions, is not a concentration camp. Importing Frankl's survival strategy into a life that is already rich with present-tense meaning is not wisdom. It's a category error. Frankl himself actually distinguished three sources of meaning. what you create, what you receive through love and beauty, and the stance you take toward unavoidable suffering. None of the three requires a future orientation. Creating something, receiving beauty, bearing difficulty well, all of these can be entirely present tense acts. The purpose industry extracted one narrow reading and sold it as the whole story. Years ago, working with an international peacekeeping organization in the Sinai, I found myself imagining two mechanical engineers who loved working on the massive generators that powered the base. They loved the craft of it, the diagnostics, the tuning, the satisfaction of a motor running clean. One day, one of them discovers that his favorite generator, the one he'd spent the most hours refining, was never actually wired to anything. No cable, no load. It had never powered a single light. Would that change anything for you, if you were him? For some people, yes. A retroactive collapse. Years of work suddenly feeling pointless. For others, not really. They loved the work itself. The cable was never where their satisfaction lived. That split tells you something important. The person who needs the cable to be real has built their sense of meaning on a single unverifiable fact about a future or larger outcome. The person who doesn't need it has built their satisfaction on something no discovery can touch. The quality of their own engagement, right now. The purpose-driven life, structurally, asks you to bet that the cable is there. Many people can't verify that bet for years, if ever. And that unresolved bet is where a great deal of quiet, unaddressed distress actually lives. The sentence worth taking seriously. Go back to where I started. If I can't find my purpose for living, maybe I don't have a reason to live. That sentence was not a personal breakdown. It was a logical conclusion built from premises the culture handed her. A meaningful life requires a clear purpose. I don't have one, therefore, my life might not be worth living. She supplied the conclusion. The books, the questionnaires, the TED Talks, and the infographics supplied the other two lines. Nobody is tracking how many people move through their 20s, 30s, and 40s in low-grade dread because the calling never arrived with sufficient clarity. Nobody counts the relationships left, the careers abandoned, the years deferred, all in pursuit of a purposive clarity that was always going to stay just out of reach. I didn't stop asking about meaning. I stopped asking about purpose first. The question I now ask, borrowed from the philosopher Rebecca Goldstein's work on what she calls the mattering instinct, is simpler and more honest. Where do you already feel that you count to someone in some part of your life right now? Mattering, unlike purpose, doesn't require a future tense. You can matter to people who love you today. You can matter through a craft you return to daily. You can matter by holding yourself to your own private standard. You can matter by building towards something that will outlast you. All of those are real. And purpose was never the only door into a meaningful life. It was always just one door, dressed up for cultural and commercial reasons, as the only one that counted. You don't need to verify the cable. Stop asking what your life is for. Start asking where it already counts. To people, in a craft, against your own standard, or towards something you hope outlasts you. Then ask the smaller question every day. What is one thing I can do inside that domain that feels worth doing today? Not forever. Today. You don't need to verify the cable. You need to notice what's already running.